CitizenCon Direct has happened, folks, and we've got some things to talk about. Was it a disappointment? Honestly, yeah, in some ways. But it wasn't necessarily bad. See, there have been a lot of CitizenCons where CIG likes to talk up what's coming. And they've focused a lot on features over the years. We've all been pretty enthralled in it. Features of what have driven excitement around this game. And for the whole of 2025, they've turned their magnifying glasses on content. Content is now their way of getting people excited. Look at the trailers, look at Inside Star Citizen, look at the patches. That's, mixed in with the bug fixes and stuff. But right now we're talking about content. And 2025 CitizenCon Direct was all content. We're going to get to crafting. We're going to talk about Nix. We're going to talk about new events and activities, factions going on. But the thing to keep in mind is this CitizenCon is just the bottle cap on top of a year of the same idea. And that is content focused to keep people playing, because it's no longer about getting us excited for features. And I think CitizenCon Direct really showed us that. Rumor has it that Space Tomato Gaming Guy is going to have a whole summary about this idea and what this means for the future of the game over on Space Tomato Gaming later this week. But here, we're going to talk about a little summary of everything that we saw. Well, all the most interesting things that we saw. Let's jump into it. First, with Genesis, the Planet Tech updates. I was wrong. I thought it was going to be Microtech that saw this first implementation, but it is Nix 1, which means, as was basically shown in the event, that Nix will not be having its planets in the initial update. So we are getting Nix in November, and this really is the Nix we've been expecting this whole time. Levski, Delamar, the asteroid belt. Now they are talking more about fleshing it out with planets. Now, I knew there were going to be planets in the system. I didn't expect them to be much, so Nix in my head is already just those things that I mentioned. But it is kind of a bummer that the Nix we are getting is not going to come all at once. In fact, it looks like it's going to be built a bit like Stanton, adding locations and things as time goes on over the next year. But that's getting more into Nix. Let's stick to Planet Tech. Now, this new update is introducing biomes that are based on rule sets. This is something that Space Tomato Gaming Guy talked about in a video back in like July or something. Basically, you have soil types, soil depth, you got species of plants that are competing with each other, geological differences on mountains and the way that rocks will crumble down the side of said mountains. You have sunlight, you have water amount, humidity in the air, temperature. All of these things are going to drive the actual foliage across a planet, and it's supposed to transition and look a lot better, both from orbit and down to the ground. They're using some pretty good proprietary technology. And I gotta say, of all the things that Star Citizen does, the Planet Tech, I think, has been the most interesting and the most clearly iterative throughout the years. They've always been at the forefront, and I think they're doing great stuff here. The big takeaway from it, though, is that there are some ramifications of this in mining and the way that they are starting to now calculate how rocks will be scattered and how resources will spawn in those rocks across planets. So I would keep an eye out for that sometime in the next 6 to 12 months. Oh, also, grass is looking really nice. You can even see in this scene where this rover goes up and over a little hill and then back down the other side, and it's just, it's smooth. There's no rocks. You're not going all over the place, glitching through the ground. I want that in this game, please. Thank you. Next up is Nix. The Nix system, like I said, is coming in not with its planets, but still with a lot of stuff planned. So first of all, the memo going forward is narrative. Okay, we've gotten that out of the way. Content, narrative, they're building out the verse. Everything that they add, think about it this way. At some point, 5 years from now, whatever, somebody is going to jump into this game for the first time, and they're going to see all kinds of storylines and activities and things to do. Those are the things that they're building out right now. That's what they're getting into the game. So while Stanton and Pyro saw a little bit of that, mainly Stanton in 2025, Nix is supposed to see it more in 2026. And we can assume Castra would see more of that in something like 2027. Now, who knows if they'll get bogged down with this kind of workflow, if they'll be able to keep things updated and playable, but this does mean that we're going to have more regular things to do throughout different parts of the game, depending on what you like. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is pretty combat focused, as that's the easiest thing for them to make. Squadron 42 bleeds a lot of combat features in, and the weapons feature team has clearly been busy. They've got a couple new guns coming in, which includes the Space AK, which shoots alternating ballistic and energy rounds, an LMG style weapon that shoots real slow but apparently hits pretty hard with 50 cal bullets, and an RPG, which essentially chucks 3 grenades duct taped together into whatever you're aiming at close proximity. There's also going to be binoculars added, so you'll be able to spot people from a distance, but like, wouldn't it be great if you, I don't know, you could transfer the data of those people you spot to your friends? Possibly, maybe, please. Anyways, continuing on in Nyx, one of the big things that's coming with this system is actually the municipal works, which were supposed to be in ArcCorp, but now are in Nyx. Maybe we'll get underground stuff in all of the landing zones, but it has been ripped away from ArcCorp, its dying grasp, that old planet, and put into Nyx for some more good landing zone based gameplay, stuff you could just spawn in and immediately get into. Think of it like contested zones. Now, these locations are not going to be all combat. There's exploration gameplay involved there. I'm guessing there will be engineering and resource management, and there will probably be some loot to find, but there is going to be some combat involved down there. In terms of things to do, there's also going to be the initial event that actually plays out when we get to Nyx, which is indeed next month. Welcome to Nyx is going to include some things from the ASD storyline. It's basically a continuation of what we've already been seeing. And I do wonder how closely ASD is to the main storyline of Star Citizen. The main storyline is focused around Terra and their kind of struggle with Earth to be the center of humanity, but the ASD storyline does seem to have a lot of legs, and it's heading into different systems, so I'm interested in seeing how this fares. That being said, this is going to be another combined arms kind of combat related scenario, so might not be everybody's favorite. Now, a more industrial focused type of gameplay coming to Nyx is actually interstellar cargo routes. They have announced that the Hull C is going to have more specialized gameplay based around the exterior cargo elevators that are featured in Levski, and the fact that you have to go through jump points to deliver from Levski. This is going to be cool because it's the first landing zone besides Orison where a Hull C can land and actually load and unload stuff. Usually you have to stay in space at a space station, but with, Levski being on an asteroid, it's different. Hopefully this allows them to make some pretty interesting scenarios with commodities and minerals found in the Nyx system that sell for high in the Stanton system and require us to then do some shipments back and forth and protect our people. They also did mention that there is some combat risk when it comes to hauling these goods interstellar, which is cool. That definitely makes things more interesting. We don't need combat everywhere, but some suspense and opportunity for things to go wrong does make things more interesting. I think the main thing that worries me here is there was no mention of probability volumes, which have always been a big part of this idea of risk around these more dangerous areas. StarSim, where are you? Speaking of mining, it is good to know a huge new asteroid belt is coming in with the Nyx system, and it does feature some advancement in asteroids. Because they mentioned that minerals are getting some changes when it comes to planet tech, maybe they're also looking at doing the same kind of thing when it comes to asteroids, but they haven't said anything clear just yet. That being said, this asteroid belt offers a huge amount of opportunities for them to make an industrial empire in Nyx, make something interesting that attracts people there. Miners, cargo haulers, escorts, and pirates. Makes Nyx a little bit more interesting. It's not necessarily a lawless system, it is an outlaw system, it's not owned by the UEE, but it does have a faction that cares quite a bit about keeping the peace. Intersec is involved there, the People's Alliance wants to keep the peace, so it's not necessarily going to be a crime spree when you're out there. There will be good work for bounty hunters, of course, but you're going to be safer than you're supposed to be, at least in Pyro. Rockcracker. That is an interesting new event that's getting started out there as well. This is also a mining focused event, but it's got a pretty heavy emphasis on combat as well. Bet you couldn't have guessed that. It's best to think of this as Hathor in space. Hathor on a much larger scale. There are these gargantuan old day mining platforms out in the asteroid belt, half built into asteroids that slice rocks in half and allow whatever is inside to be spilled out, the booty. You're going to be able to take your crew and go reactivate these mining platforms and crack these rocks open so you can get the absolutely massive amount of minerals out. It does sound like this is actually meant to be something where a guild or an org is planning on building something big or needs a huge haul of resources. Think of it like the spice mining in Dune Wars. You are setting out with your group for a few hours to lock this down, get the goods, and get out. I think this offers a really cool opportunity going forward for large groups. It doesn't do much really for the solo players, at least not until we have more looking for group opportunities and social tools and voice chat and where was that stuff? But the content going into Nyx, it does seem properly satisfying and properly challenging. This one is going to require you to do a lot of reactivating of systems on the interior and dealing with possible outlaws as they try to stop you. Obviously, just like Hathor, it is going to cause you some danger because it's putting off a lot of energy, so it will attract other people. Like I said, large Hathor. And then there's also some new interesting gameplay. It's called tactical strike groups. They like to consider it to be space for spaceships. This is something that's supposed to allow for people to go out in what is almost felt to be more of getting into fleet battles. We're finally starting to talk about the compositions of ships. This is an event that's going to require drop ships, capital ships, bombers, and some medium or heavy fighters that can get into close quarters and destroy some objectives. Laying this out simply, this starts out with you jumping into a space to defend a ship that's under fire. You're going to hold off those fighters, make sure the ship is safe. Then you're going to move on to the space station that it was nearby. It's going to be heavily defended, and there's actually going to be a couple of different things you have to do to get around its defenses. We're talking about special damage spots that you have to apply enough damage to make it turn off a shield, which can then make you able to attack another thing. They've got big guns that are kind of anti-capital ship guns. So you have to punch a hole in for your bombers to get in, take out those objectives on the outside of the station so that your capital ships can then come in. And with this, they revealed there would be refueling and rearming services on capital ships. So you want to keep them there so your fighters can get in and out and do what they need to do. Now, after you've gotten to the space station and you've gotten past its defenses, you then have to fly your fighters inside and blow it up from the inside. This is very Death Star in its design. I think everybody noticed that. And because your ship is getting distortion damage while you're inside this structure, you can't actually stick around for too long. So you got to fly in, blow some things up, get out, and watch it explode from the inside. Once you've passed that final objective, apparently there's a surprise Vanduul's fleet that kind of ambushes you. So with Nyx, the Vanduul is going to start to become a regular enemy in the PU, which is new. Aliens do not have a big presence in the PU, and while it's just going to be their spaceships flying around, it does start to get us more into that mindset and understanding of the story going forward. Since Star Citizen takes place after Squadron 42, we're actually going to start to learn more about what the actual future and storyline of Star Citizen is as we go along in Nyx. Finally, what I forgot to mention was that during this mission, you actually can evacuate passengers from the space station. It kind of sounds like maybe there's a little bit of NPCs hopping on ships, hopping off that could be happening soon. That is the potential for a big feature that could make a big difference, so we'll keep an eye on that. That's it for Nyx and the planet stuff, but I heard again that Space Tomato Gaming guy was going to do some kind of a Nyx overview sometime in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Let us move on to crafting. Crafting. Oh my gosh. I actually thought crafting would come after base building. I don't want to talk about it. But crafting is coming. Not quite to the game, but the tech preview is supposed to have some form of crafting by the end of this year. I don't think that means it's going to launch anytime particularly soon. This does feel like the same way they've done tech previews in the past, which is you see it once and then you don't see it for a little while. But it is being worked on. We've seen it in the monthly reports over the past year that there is some level of reorganization around what that initial release is going to be, and now we're getting it. Clearly before base building, but I don't think that far before. Now with crafting, they are going to start adding quality levels to resources, which means that you could be looking for aluminum quality level 100 or aluminum quality level 350. Depending on what you find can change how powerful the gun is that you craft with it. And that gets carried through the mining process to the refining process, finally to the crafting process. This is the whole progression of the game. This is the player market. This is how you as a person can get really, really good at making something, because either you have the blueprints that other people need or you have the materials other people need. You make money as a crafter, you make money as a miner. Whatever it's going to be, quality of materials is an important part of it. And that seems to be a big part of this initial part of crafting. It's going to just be armor and guns and just kind of small scale crafting, but it is something. It is a start, and I look forward to seeing what they do with it. That's probably the most significant feature update we got during this show, and I think that is mainly just because it's so close at hand. But don't forget, there's quite a bit that's been going on in monthly reports that we don't know about, and looking at this recent salvage update, there's a stuff that's going on not in the monthly reports that we don't know about as well. I think something like engineering, I guess, is close enough at hand that they don't feel the need to spend time on it. But I do genuinely think they had the opportunity to show a good gameplay demo during this whole thing and maybe give us a look at a new feature or two. They need good stuff to share. That's what it seems CIG is focused on as well. They want to expand their numbers. They want to bring in new people. They want to continue to grab people with the content that they're putting out. And the best way to do that, I think, is a nice, short, shareable 30-minute gameplay demo that YouTubers can react to and Discord servers can get posted and people can just share with their friends. It's the best way to share the advertisement of a game these days. It's word of mouth. The fact that they didn't do that, especially with some features present, I think was a bit of a miss on their part, but that was the decision they made. Continuing on in the features aspect, instancing is also something that was discussed. I think this was more a reply to people who are feeling a little more worried that PvE gameplay and gameplay that's more controlled and curated won't be in the game. This definitely makes some people feel like the game is continuing on in some certain direction. Call of Duty Call of Citizen of Duty? I don't know. A lot of people think that when they're deciding to do one thing, that means they're going all in that direction, but I do think that part of this talk about instancing was to make sure people knew that wasn't happening. That they want to have this open space, the PU, where we are in space in between instances, in between planets, all this stuff, but they also want to make sure that there are closed spaces where they can tell a story, they can get people into an event, they can give people protected gameplay, or even just allow them to meet with a mission giver without getting swamped by a whole bunch of other people. How we all feel about this, I think, will depend on how it's implemented. I mean, I don't have anything against instancing. I think it should be lightly used for certain things, but it definitely can be interesting in a game like this. The first instance we will probably see, besides obviously the player hangars we already have, is Siege of Orison, which does make sense as something that gets instanced. This will have us landing on floating platforms around the planet of Crusader and assaulting little bases and killing NPCs, but it should be a good time for anywhere from 10 to 20 people to play together. Obviously, it's a little bit of a larger gameplay segment, but we get some of those every now and then. Besides that, we saw 3 new spaceships, the Shiv from Gray's Market. I knew that was a possibility, but did not have that one in my predictions. Interesting to see. I do wish it was something that was only sold in-game. It seems like it would feel like that kind of niche, but it sounds like it's already on the store. The Paladin is also in the game. Pretty cool ship. I'm excited for that one, but I have not laid eyes on it just yet. Besides that, the Vanduul Stinger is coming into the game, and while it is a new ship for us, it has been in Squadron 42 for a while, so it does sound like it's coming in without a gold standard pass, and it's just the Squadron 42 finish, which means components and more polished stuff we would expect is not quite true with it. Bit of a disappointing state of the ship, but I hope they do get it updated pretty quickly when engineering is coming on board. And that's about it. There are a few more details in there, some things that they said specifically that I think could be pretty interesting, and probably stuff that I'm forgetting sitting here in front of a camera. But I wanted to give you a little summary and my thoughts on the various things that they talked about. I think the most interesting thing I saw was probably the crafting work. I think that's the most consequential. I'm also very, very excited to see that they figured out how to get cliffs working in the game. The planetary tech, the way that grass is rendered and flows across meadows and trees, and even the coast of these rivers are now spawning in the system that they've created. I don't care if they've got reshade on in these videos. This is some good looking planets, man. These planets, these biomes look like things that were built for smaller games, you know, a game that has a 20 kilometer by 20 kilometer map. So I'm very interested in the detail and what they can fit into this. One thing that I'm a little concerned of is they're not showing us caves at all. So I'm not sure what they're doing there, but the planet tech looks great. Nyx looks good. A lot of content planned for next year. That much is clear. And I think this CitizenCon overall was the most realistic and restrained show they've ever given. I think this was a good job of, for the first time, showing us things that I think realistically we could all see by the end of next year. There's always been something, whether it's base building or sandworms or NPCs flying ships with us on board or player-owned space stations. There's always been something that feels like a long shot, imagine this distant kind of thing. This was all Nyx content. It was narrative content, which we've seen them delivering all year this year. It was ships and weapons, which we know they can get into the game. It was crafting in a very small scale, which I'm glad they've laid it out that way. It was a new asteroid belt, which could bring in some more resources and include some points of interest that make things more interesting for miners and cargo haulers, and maybe even explorers if we can figure out a way to share locations, but it's still low-key. The planets aren't coming in, but it is coming in next month. How often do we actually get large-scale things announced at CitizenCon and coming in the next month? Instancing is good tech, and I think a big message to people who are following the game that certain types of gameplay are still being pursued. Tactical strike groups are showing that they're looking for that more Battlefront-style combined arms gameplay between space station, dropships, and all that kind of stuff that I think a lot of people joined into a game like this to experience. And Planetary is looking pretty good. I do hope that that can swing back around to Stanton soon, because I'd love to see what the other planets look like with this fresh sheen of paint on it. But it's good looking stuff. Overall, was this CitizenCon a disappointment? As somebody who's been following this game and trying to describe how the features and mechanics are supposed to work for years, this whole year has been a disappointment. I was hoping that we would continue to develop features and watch how the game was progressing towards 1.0. But this is working for them. And it seems they're still getting to do their own work in the background, and honestly, Squadron 42 is really what they care about. So when I say that this was an opportunity for us to really understand how the company works with Squadron 42 as the focus, and Star Citizen kind of doodling along in the background, I think this showed us. Narrative content, keeping people engaged in playing, and pushing forward a little more realistically seems to be their goal going forward. I hope they stick to this. I hope their communication stays like this, maybe a little more open on the feature front. And I hope that they actually deliver everything that they've talked about here. If they can give us a good 2026 that meets the expectations that they actually set, that's a great move for them. But I'm also a little concerned with how well we are moving towards Star Citizen 1.0 after this. That being said, it's the first weekend. I gotta watch this again. I was distracted. We were doing our live watch party, which was a lot of fun. And we were also hanging out in the Discord, on the stream, pretty distracted. So I'll be watching this again. If I'm not already live watching this or have already watched this live, you can check it out over on Space Tomato Gaming. There will be a lot more discussion and pausing and looking into all the different things that we had talked about during that. And I'll have some coverage about these different aspects over the next couple weeks, so subscribe if you'd like to see that. I hope you enjoyed this, I hope you learned something here, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a great day.